All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our February 2025 edition of our FinCrime Friday chats. We have a great lineup for you today, and we are super excited to have everybody tuning in, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube. If you're joining us today, we're excited to have you here, and we want to hear from you. So before we get into things, let us know. Drop a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We love to see those comments coming in from people all over the world, letting us know, that our community is really tuned in from the four corners of the globe today. So today we got a really exciting discussion. I think something that's very timely and topical. We're going to be talking about the risks of generative AI in the financial crime and compliance world. As anybody who's tuning into this knows, the past couple of years, you can't go anywhere without hearing about ChatGPT, Llama, any of the other Gemini, any of the other generative AI platforms. And we're going to really dive deep into the implications of those for financial crime and compliance professionals. Before we do that, we've got our ACFCS experts here today. Brian and Cheyenne, you guys want to go ahead and just introduce yourselves real quick for our followers?
Sure, I'll go first since I'm in the middle. I'm Cheyenne Visca. I'm the training manager here at ACFCS. In my former life, I was an AML compliance specialist. I started in a call center for international remittances, just doing basic onboarding, fielding phone calls, and moved up into alerts, cases, and onboarding for businesses and charities. So kind of all over the place, but super fun to be here. Fun to look at the broad scope of topics we cover here at ACFCS. And over to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, Cheyenne. Pleasure to be doing this with you. I'm Brian Spoda-Kindle with ACFCS. I've been here as long as anyone can possibly remember. And it's good to be back with the audience here. A shout out to our folks from Lebanon, I see in the chat, Dubai, Nigeria. We have Toronto, Canada in the house. Big shout out to everybody from Toronto. We have a great chapter there that is putting together some great thought leadership content. So good to see you. And let us know if you haven't chimed in yet. Let us know where you're joining us from. Thanks for tuning in.
Drop those comments. Also, if you have questions throughout our conversation today, please, we want to hear those questions. We want to try to get to as many as we can. Throw them in the comments, and whatever part of the conversation we're in, we'll try to get to them and give you answers. We really, really want to hear from you guys today. So just real quick, if you're not an ACFCS member and you want to have more training, you want to have more tools at your disposal, you want to tap into an incredible network of other financial crime and compliance professionals, go to acfcs.org, become a member today. Not only do you get access to these types of conversations that we're having today, but hundreds of hours of training, incredible webinars, members only events. You get access to our State Your Case podcast, where you get to hear true tales of financial crime and the investigators who cracked some of the wildest cases that you've probably ever encountered. All that starts by becoming a member. So acfcs.org, become a member today. And if you're already a member, man, we appreciate you. We love having you, and we want to hear from you. Okay. So before we get into talking about generative AI, we're going to run through some news updates and headlines from the world of financial crime. So first off, we've got FBI says North Korea was responsible for a $1.5 billion hack. FBI has attributed the recent $1.5 billion theft from cryptocurrency exchange Bybit to North Korean cyber actors, specifically identifying the malicious activity as Trader. The stolen assets have been rapidly converted into Bitcoin and other virtual currencies, spread out across numerous blockchain addresses, and are expected to be laundered and eventually converted into fiat currency. Brian, what do you think about that?
Phew, this is a fun one. The Bybit hack is probably the largest single heist theft of anything of all time, right? So really historic moment we're living through here. And it definitely demonstrates the continued vulnerability of the crypto space to this type of malicious cybercrime. You know, there's been a lot of big strides in security, you know, from the early days of like Mount Gox or something, if anybody remembers that, where it was like real amateur hour on the cybercrime, on the cybersecurity side, to a very sophisticated, you know, multi-signature was set up on these wallets. It was just a convincing attack basically from North Korea. Lazarus Group, really good at this. They are the North Korean advanced persistent threat actor who's behind this attack and many others. And, you know, it's been really interesting to see the industry response to talking about the evolution of kind of the crypto space. It's really been like all hands on deck, not just the blockchain analytics firms, but so many in the crypto space to trace and pursue this. And every day there's some new updates, leadership, you know, being taken in this space to show where these funds are going, flag bad wallets that they're moving to. It's unclear at this point how successful they're going to be at laundering some of this money. I mean, most likely they will be successful at getting quite a bit. But you know, the nature of the blockchain is right. This is transparent. So the ability to see these funds move cross-chain, you know, stolen in Ether. Now it's being transferred through various means into right now, apparently, or at least it's like yesterday's update. A lot of it was ending up in Bitcoin, which is interesting that they would do that because for a variety of reasons that we won't get into. But they were doing a bunch of different laundering techniques than Lazarus Group had necessarily employed in the past. And now they're moving it to Bitcoin and maybe some more tried and true methods. Is it going to work out for them? I think a lot of it depends on how fast the crypto space can respond. And Bybit's put out this bounty program too, where they'll pay 10% of funds that are recovered. So there's a big impetus for players in the space to identify these wallets and attempt to seize them and freeze them, right? So if you're at an exchange, it's not only good because it's the right thing, sanctioned bad actor tied to North Korea moving these funds. Hey, you can make a little money off it too, right? If you can identify this wallet and freeze it. So fascinating to see this play out. You know, it's sort of like the two sides of the evolution of crypto, right? On one hand, continued vulnerability and just absolute continued attraction for these advanced threat actors to these very high value targets, and on the other hand, a environment, a compliance and security environment that enables a massive effort to trace and recover some of these funds, we hope. So, Shine, what do you think about this one?
It feels like, you know, we often talk about crypto as like this wild west, and with this bounty program, it feels even more so like that. It's just you know, we have future FinCrime skills going up, and the light theme for that is you know, like um, you know, the eras of financial crime and financial crime prevention. And so it just reminds me of the fact that, you know, banks in today's day and age didn't always have the securities and the controls in place to keep assets as safe as they do now. Um, and it feels like crypto is slowly following along that trend. So, um, you know, we're past the kicking down the door and pulling down the bars of the bank and, you know, digging into the coffers, but you know, still a long way to go to get to where we are in traditional finance for security.
Yeah, and I mean the last point I'll raise is just I remember we did this webinar. We had a couple webinars last year. I'll give a shout out to Jessica Peck at the DOJ and Chris Wong at the FBI, who we did these presentations with. They do a lot of work on North Korea, and they talked about just like how good these guys are, and how much work they've done to understand the crypto ecosystem and the way to move and launder funds and the speed at which you can do it. It's just so fast, and they take advantage. In the North Korean threat actors take advantage of that like very few others do when it comes to money laundering. And so that's an interesting point that's relevant beyond the crypto space. Is like you got to know your products and your systems better than they do, or at least as good as they do. Because if you don't, then you're really vulnerable when things go wrong, and that's kind of what we're seeing play out right now. But
Wow.
enough about that. Let's go to the next thing.
Well, just one more thing I'll add. It sounds like we need a dedicated FinCrime Friday chat or some kind of session specifically on the Lazarus Group and what they do, because that actually sounds incredible and fascinating.
Yeah. I mean,
Also,
people can't believe that North Korea, is this good at cybercrime, right? They're always like, "Is this really North Korea?" And yeah, it is. They invested in it. They trained the people. It's in some ways it's easy to do, right? Like you don't need computers and you need internet access, and that's cheap. And then you can steal, $1.5 billion.
incredible. Also, shout out to Anthony, who just joined us from the USA. Glad to have you here with us, Anthony. I see South Africa in there as well. Again, if you haven't chimed in, let us know where you're tuning in from. We love seeing that. Okay, going on to our next news headline. This one is the operator of OKX crypto exchange enters a $505 million guilty plea in the US. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but Oxkai's fintech company, the operator of the OKX cryptocurrency exchange, pleaded guilty to violating U.S. anti-money laundering laws and agreed to pay over $505 million in fines and forfeitures. The Seychelles-based company admitted to operating an unlicensed money transmitting business, facilitating over $5 billion in suspicious transactions involving U.S. customers. Okay, where do we start with this one?
I mean, it just feels like a classic risk versus reward type of scenario. It's important to point out that they did cooperate with the probe when the probe was launched, which is, good. But they attributed it all to like legacy compliance issues. And it really, when you're operating in a space that is moving so fast, if you're always reactive and you're not taking any kind of preactive measures or proactive more so measures, it's really just it's behind the times. So that's my 2 cents from going through that. It's just it's a balance. Like do the right thing, make your money. If you're a business, you need to make money, but try your best to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely seemed like in many ways, they sort of shine, to your point, old school violation that we saw a lot of in the earlier days of crypto and still playing out now. We're talking a lot about crypto, which I think is timely. There's a lot going on in the space, but this is, kind of like a bread and butter licensing and registration violation, right? They weren't registered in the United States as a money transmitter, and they served US customers and in fact sought them out. Can't do that. That's generally frowned upon by the authorities. And this was something that a lot of crypto exchanges and crypto businesses more broadly and fintechs more broadly that can operate internationally ran into, and I guess continue to run into, is if you are serving customers in a jurisdiction, what are your licensing and regulatory requirements in that jurisdiction? If you're not registered there, you can't be soliciting customers in that jurisdiction in most cases, right? Each jurisdiction's different, but if you want to operate in the US as a financial services entity of whatever kind, crypto or otherwise, there are generally going to be any number of licensing requirements on you. And if you don't comply with them, you need to take steps to not serve those customers, such as like geo-blocking, geofencing, right? You need to have ways to say, no, we don't take customers from the US. And obviously, OKX didn't do it. They actually did the opposite and sought out the customers. So as a result, they were not only not licensed, there are also some AML and CTF and KYC failings involved in this enforcement action too. Allegedly $5 billion worth of suspicious transactions in the mix here that led to this penalty. Then the other thing this points out is like this structure that a lot of crypto exchanges used and some still use. I think it's moved a little bit away from this, but yeah, it was like this Seychelles-based entity with this affiliate, and this affiliate obviously has a doing, it's a doing business as name. So number one, you're never going to see like OKX Exchange. Well, not never, but you're probably not going to see OKX Exchange show up in like your activity if you're another type of financial institution. Your customers are sending money to a crypto exchange. It usually, very rarely is it going to be like, XYZ crypto exchange or like Bitmania crypto exchange. They have different names they go by. As Clayton said, it's like all K's FinTech Co. Limited.
Right.
Might tell you to look into that, but it doesn't look like a crypto exchange, right? And the other thing is it's this continued regulatory arbitrage issue with crypto where, they're seeking out a place where it's like low or no regulatory environment, right? But that doesn't mean you can operate in a regulated country and jurisdiction, et cetera, without going through the right hoops to become a properly licensed entity there. So,
okay. Really interesting stuff there. We're going to go straight to our final news story or news headline for right now in the interest of time, so we can get into the topic for today. So this one is going to be Kinahan, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Kinahan Cartel's Asian Money Laundering Network Exposed. I believe this is from the Times of London, but I could be wrong. I can't see there. An investigation has uncovered that the Kinahan cartel has established an extensive money laundering network across Southeast Asia, utilizing hubs in Singapore and Indonesia. The cartel has been laundering proceeds from criminal activities and making legitimate profits through investments, exploiting weak enforcement measures in the region. And actually, I think we have somebody who joined us from Singapore today. But anyway, I thought this one was interesting, getting away from crypto a little bit and into kind of the more maybe traditional money laundering networks that we sometimes talk about, especially in relation to drug trafficking organizations. What do you think, Ryan?
Oh man, Kinahans, pick your crime movie, like, right? It's like your Guy Ritchie British films, Snatch, etc., or maybe they have a little bit of John Wick's mixed in. They are very famous, notorious Irish drug cartel with ties to any number of other European cartels. What's interesting is they also run some seemingly legitimate business sidelines there. Like the guy that was just on the screen in the middle, like fist up type of thing. Daniel Kinahan ran a major boxing promotion firm. If anybody's a boxing fan out there, the Tyson Fury few really high profile fights that he fought were set up by Daniel Kinahan, who is allegedly also running the day-to-day operations of this crime family. Daniel Kinahan, I think most of the Kinahans live in Dubai. They were talking about going to, I don't know him, so take this with a grain of salt. All I know is what I read in the papers, but they were rumored to be talking about moving to Russia, but they live pretty openly in Dubai currently. Most of the family and some of their associates, and operate a network of businesses there. And it was interesting to see that they, also operate a network of businesses and laundering operations in Asia too. And I think it's, to your point, it's sort of like more traditional cartel activity. We talk a lot about the crypto space, but this is a lot. The Kinahans primarily run cocaine and other drugs, and they operate in Asia through a network of shell companies. In part, it seems they're also being facilitated by political corruption, bribing public officials. And it's, it's kind of classic stuff. There's real estate investments, there's purchases of beachfront property in this story. There's providing loans to complicit entities, all your kind of money laundering 101. So I think it highlights these classic threats that are still out there and are still seemingly quite successful despite our best efforts.
I mean, it seems like there's still a ton of ways to hide the flow of funds, to obscure where money's going and coming from, even if you're not dabbling in Bitcoin or other crypto assets. For somebody, what can somebody who might be working at a bank in a compliance or anti-money laundering situation take from, a story like this?
I mean, the oldies but goodies are still true, right? Like we talk about connections to sanctioned entities. Some of the Kinahans are subject to U.S. sanctions, OFAC sanctions. I think including Daniel Kinahan, but I might be wrong about that. We talk about politically exposed persons and ties to politically exposed persons. We talk about even, more recently, there's been a lot of focus on like corruption and financial crime risk in the sports world. The Kinahans got it all. So if you're looking at that wider risk profile and you're keeping some of these classic measures in mind, you would be able to hopefully potentially see some of this activity. Now, the issue is like, how do you know, right? Like, how do you know that customer XYZ has ties to a politically exposed person? Or how do you know that shell company XYZ has a shared connection or ownership stake to, a sanctioned entity, or maybe it's a couple hops down the line, right? This shell company has connections to this shell company, which has connections to a sanctioned entity. So it's easier said than done. But John, what are your thoughts, particularly on like the due diligence piece? Like, how do you dig into this to get to these answers?
So, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. Like the red flags are tried and true. There's a reason why they are your standard red flags, and you put them all together to build yourself, a cake. To bake your cake, you need all your red flags, right? Um, so for businesses, making sure that you're identifying the UBO, making sure that you're getting the IDs and all the documents that are required, and depending on where you're from. I know we have quite an international crowd with us today. You might have different requirements, but like really looking into it and just making sure you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, and going down as best you can. Hopefully, your institution, and I will keep my fingers crossed, will give you the software so that your screening really gives you that like clear picture of potential related individuals and entities as well. So, fingers crossed that if you don't have it, you get it soon.
All right. Great. All right. Well, that's our headlines. Let's jump right into the meat of the conversation here. So, generative artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming the financial landscape. It's offering both unprecedented opportunities and emerging challenges. On one hand, financial institutions are using AI to enhance efficiency, automate complex processes, and bolster defenses against financial crimes. On the other hand, bad actors are also exploiting generative AI to conduct sophisticated fraud schemes. The technology's ability to create realistic fake content has already been utilized in various cybercrimes, including phishing scams and deep fake impersonations, posing significant threats to individuals and organizations. The dual-edged nature of generative AI, necessitates a comprehensive discussion on its implications within the financial crime and compliance sectors, and understanding how all of this works and how it can be both a tool for innovation as well as a vector for sophisticated fraud is crucial for developing effective strategies to harness its benefits while mitigating the associated risks. So that's to set the stage a little bit. To jump right into it, Brian, let's start with you. How are cyber criminals currently utilizing generative AI to enhance the sophistication of their financial fraud schemes?
Yeah. How aren't they? Might be the easier question to answer, right? I think it's very widespread. And I guess I would frame it in two buckets to kind of, give some structure to it, right? Well, first off, to back up even further, let's go all the way back to 2014, right? There is actually a graduate student, a computer science graduate student, who came up with the generative adversarial network idea, which is like basically, not to get too technical, I don't understand it myself, so I can't get that technical. But it's computer networks like machine learning, networks that are competing against one another to process data, right? And this allowed this GAN, generative adversarial network, is sort of like the precursor to what we think of as current deepfakes. And this, researchers then used it to produce fake images. At first, it was fake pictures, right? And if anybody ever played around with a website called This Person Does Not Exist, it's still up, it's still there, but it's been there for like, I don't know, 8 years or more at this point. And you can go and you can generate a fake picture of somebody. So this isn't a new challenge in a lot of ways. It's existed for a while. What's happening is that it's just becoming so consumer friendly and intuitive to use these tools that the bar of entry is a lot lower. You don't need to know much anymore. And unfortunately, the other aspect of it that you would think might have like evolved a little faster than it has is us, right? Cheyenne mentioned the FinCrime eras, future of FinCrime skills theme, playing into like the Taylor Swift, right? We're the problem. It's us, right? So I was reading this Department of Homeland Security report, and it was like it was interesting because it reframed it. It's like, look, the technology itself is not the issue. The problem is that people tend to believe what they see and are presented with. I would probably argue that the technology at this point is also the issue, but the bigger challenge is that we continue to believe what we are presented with, right? And if we simply did not believe anything that we were presented with, we may actually be in a better place as both financial crime professionals and a society. But I'll get off of that tangent and get back to the question at hand, which is how cyber criminals are using it. So they've had these tools for a while. The bar of entry is lower. And what that means is that you're having a wider range of like attack types using generative AI than you have had in the past. For a while, we've had the more sophisticated attacks. Those are just getting better and easier. A lot of people probably saw the case targeted a large multinational British engineering firm. I think it's Arup is the name. It targeted the Hong Kong-based staff of that firm. And this guy got pulled into a meeting with like 7 other of his colleagues, and they were all deep fakes, but he didn't know that. After getting this inquiry from the CFO, who's also business email compromise attack, saying, "Hey, we need to wire this vendor $25 million." And the guy rightfully questioned it, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm in a meeting right now. Let me pull you in." This is the CFO saying this to the target. Gets pulled into the meeting, and there's all these people who look and sound just like his coworkers. Have a conversation quickly about this transaction and execute it, right? That's a level of sophistication that was not available to criminals in the past, and it is now. On the other hand, you just have the same old stuff, right? Like you have, phishing emails, but now these phishing emails are just it's easier to write them because you can use ChatGPT or whatever, right? And you don't need to know English at all, or you need to know very little English to execute these types of attacks in a convincing way. So you have more tools for sophisticated threat actors, and then you have a lower barrier of entry for fraud on the like very, very amateurish, not sophisticated at all side. So, they're being used in 2 ways. One is to attack financial institutions directly, right, through like new account opening fraud to set up money mule accounts, etc. The other thing is, and probably the more dire threat right now, is they're attacking your customers if you're at a financial institution or just people. They're being used for scams to make scams more convincing, to add an element of video interaction, etc., to what would previously be done by text or social media site. So yeah, I mean the scam one is probably the biggest evolution, and then equally risky, I would say, but less visible is the attacks against financial institutions. But Sean, I'm interested in your thoughts too. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think you summed it up really nicely. It lowers the bar. I mean, the other thing to consider is that bad actors do not have the ethical reservations that we might carry in the compliance field or prevent when we're trying to prevent these sort of things. So And just to, I might be getting ahead of myself, but coming to something like this and educating yourself and like sharing those tidbits with your peers is a really easy way to try and spread the awareness. I feel like a lot of this stuff came on so fast, and it might have been, slowly trickling in since 2014, but it feels like it's the last couple of years where you just cannot get away from generative AI. It's everywhere. It's almost too much. For me, it's too much. But the education surrounding it is not there yet. So we're talking proactive versus reactive. This is a moment where you can take a proactive approach. It's exhausting to question absolutely everything. It is so exhausting. But to be like, hey, coworker, hey Kindle, I heard that there's this thing that is recently emerging with generative AI. Like, keep an eye out for something like this. Is a really easy way to heighten the awareness in one spot without being absolutely fatigued and overwhelmed with heightened awareness of everything. So be diligent, go with your gut, hang in there.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the audience if anybody has experienced, known or suspected. It's not always easy to confirm whether it is or not. Like a generative AI incident at your, in your role, right? Like somebody trying to open an account that you suspected to be, fake identity with Gen AI or something like that. So if you've had any experiences, or maybe you've been a target of a scam or fraud where they used a deep fake, whatever it is, let us know. I'd love to hear in the chat what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, please do throw those into the comments. I also, it would be fascinating to hear. So Brian, the example that you mentioned about the people joining into what appeared to be like a Zoom call or a video conference with their coworkers who were all fake, right? Artificially created avatars of those people. Guys, like how does that work, right? How are we using generative AI to facilitate those deep fakes and to create that fraudulent content, or those deep fakes for fraudulent content and fraudulent purposes, like impersonating those people? Do y'all have insight into sort of the mechanics of how that works, and how like you would set up then a meeting that looks like you're with your coworkers?
Why are you trying to get into a new line of business, Clayton?
I mean, hey, might need some additional guests for some of our future live streams.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't claim to be a deep fake generating expert, right? And also, I know people are always worried about like, oh, well, are you sharing fraud techniques or whatever? I think anything that I say here, they've already moved on from and will do something better. So I'm not too worried about that. But, the gist of it is you can get these tools publicly. If you search, so there's one that came out a few years ago called Deepface Live. That was used pretty prevalently, and you can get it off GitHub. It's like a site where you can share code bases and etc. And at this point, there's like a robust like way to like tutorial on how to download and use it there. You can download that. Now that one is more of like a face swapping tool. You can put celebrity faces on there. There's other tools like it where you can basically train a software program using footage or even still images of a target, right? So I'm probably super vulnerable to deep faking. You could find hours of video for me and Cheyenne and you, Clayton, too, at this point. And you could train a program to mimic our face and voice. Now, if the threat actors don't have a lot, like I said, and sometimes you can even just use still images. It's not going to look as good. It won't be as convincing. But maybe if it's like a Zoom call where you're just sitting there not saying much, that might be good enough, right? If you're like the background player that needs to be deep faked, sometimes just a little bit can get you there. The AI models have also gotten a lot better. You used to need a lot of data, minutes or hours of footage to train a convincing voice model, for example. I've seen voice models, I've played around with my own voice. 5 seconds, 10 seconds of voice, and it produces something that sounds pretty darn good, honestly. So again, talking about lowering the bar, there's tons of content out there to teach you how to do all of this, right? It's on YouTube, it's on TikTok, and then some of it, like on TikTok, for example, there'll be a link to a Telegram site. You can go to the Telegram channel and find like more deeper dive content in there. It's a private channel, you might be asked to join, whatever the case may be, and you can learn from there. So how is it done? Basically, if you start looking for it, you will find out how to do it pretty quickly. And then some of it's trial and error, and not all of this is like really high quality stuff. But I think the more targeted attacks, that those more sophisticated, like 25 million attack that we saw, is like people that specialize in this. And actually, a few months ago, I think back in October, Hong Kong police busted a deepfake syndicate operating out of Hong Kong that did this as like a line of work. They specialized in deepfake. So it's like the rest of the fraud ecosystem. When there's sort of a trending thing, there's these fraud subcontractors that kind of glom onto it and become specialists in it. And now we're seeing not now, for the last few years, we're seeing deepfake specialists sort of arise from this.
Wow. Wow, that's wild. Okay, moving on from the deep fake material, one of the things that we've talked a little bit about in previous FinCrime chats are Frankenstein identities, synthetic IDs or synthetic accounts to bypass the traditional security measures. And this seems also like a place where Gen AI, could, whether through facilitating sort of the creation of these identities at scale or with specific details, could play a role in that. And I think we might have an example of one of those that we could show. But where does this fit in? Where does Gen AI fit into the creation of synthetic accounts and these Frankenstein IDs?
Well, I mean, it just makes it easier. Like, again, like this is nothing new. It's just easier to facilitate it. So, I mean, when you're making a fake profile and a fake identity, think about not having to put in any brain power into producing that, right? You have generative AI that can give you, all of this thing in a matter of seconds. So, when it's just when you're looking at the due diligence of that, I think the length of existence might be the easiest way to determine whether or not you're dealing with a real identity if you're doing like social media. But then again, you can have like these long-term projects, right? Think of it as like a pet project of an identity. Like you might have a long-term project. So there's no. I'm going to toss it over to you, Brian, because I could keep rambling. There's no easy way to determine, but we do have some tried and true. Like your red flags. Like again, I'm just going to hype you up throughout this whole conversation. Hang in there.
Let's take a look at our example of synthetic ID. So Brian, you brought this to us. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so this is from a 404 Media. If you guys, if anybody out there is looking for a good source of like cybercrime and fraud news, among others, 404 Media has been doing some really interesting research in this space. And they flagged this. It was a Telegram channel, Telegram platform for communications. Much of it legitimate, some of it fraud channels in there too. Popular place for fraudsters and scammers to collaborate, share techniques, sell stuff, etc. Anyway, there was this channel on Telegram called Only Fakes, and it was offering very high quality just images, not the physical documents themselves, like just images of ID cards, passports, etc., but very good quality ones that were produced with what they were saying was a generative AI tool. And I think some some vendors in the space have kind of unpacked it and said it was basically like some generative AI tools layered on top of like Photoshop. But whatever the case may be, these were used by these researchers for this site for media to actually pass the KYC online KYC checks at a couple of crypto exchanges and like online only financial institutions. So they worked. They were good enough to get through. What was interesting about this and what I've since seen in other of these like Gen AI fake ID tools is the scale, right? If you're a fraudster, like you're a legitimate business, you want to scale quickly. And if you steal like a bunch of data or you go buy a bunch of stolen data, like social security numbers and names and etc., how are you going to monetize that? What are you going to do with it? Well, one thing you can do is open a bunch of bank accounts, but that takes time. Are you going to produce the fake IDs for all of this? That's what you used to have to do, right? You used to have to go identity by identity and like produce the fake identity documents, right? This, like, again, the adaptation with Gen AI, one of it is like speed and scaling, right? So if I steal a bunch of PII, or I buy a bunch of PII that's already been lost in a data breach, I can take that in an Excel file and upload it. On this service, they were offering the ability to upload it and do like a batch of driver's licenses, right? And now you have 100 or whatever it is, 200 fake driver's licenses, very convincing driver's licenses at a time. That's wild in your ability to build out a mule network, or go apply for a bunch of new accounts for other fraudulent purposes. So it's really like the scale of the size of the fraud attacks that you can now commit. You can just do it faster. Like everything else, Gen AI is helping us move faster and automate a lot of the tedious tasks that we were doing. Same thing on the fraud side. Kind of looking ahead and jumping ahead a little, there's even AI agents out there, right, who can help you book a meeting or, buy a ticket to a show or whatever it is. There's some early indicators that fraudsters are using those AI agents to do things like online account opening or layering multiple AI agents together to accomplish some of this, which, there are already bots to do this, right? But financial institutions built controls around that. They looked for patterns of bot activity and they're like, if it's a bot application, flag it for more friction or review or whatever, right? AI agents don't follow those same patterns. So now the bot attack stuff you built, sorry, it doesn't work that well. Now you have a new problem, and it can move really fast, and obviously it never sleeps, and it can apply for accounts all day long. So speed and scaling, I would say, are two of the big areas where you can take synthetic IDs and really move it a lot faster than you used to.
Well, it's wild. Like we said, kind of the new Wild West, I guess. I don't know exactly, but Cheyenne, from your experience, and working in this field, looking at this today, what are your takeaways in terms of what can people who work in roles like you used to work in be aware of or take from this? And, what about the possibilities of using generative AI to even fight back against some of these fraud? What's your take on those two
Yeah,
things?
no, absolutely. There is a quote from a lady who knows way more about AI than I ever will. And she said, understanding how it works is important so that you can understand when it's not working. So, the best thing I really feel like you can do is to understand how AI is working, how it's transforming, where it's being applied. And when you bring it into your institution, it's important to understand also that your AI doesn't exist within a vacuum. So we talk about training models, what that looks like, and that comes from data sets, and data comes from people, and people are inherently silly with the ways that they, the discrepancies and, biases and that sort of thing. So understanding, in order to really utilize AI, which may in fact increase that ability to identify some of these things in real time, but understanding how it works so you can understand when it's not working, and noting that you do have biases that are trained into your models, and it takes humans a lot of the time to identify those biases, right? Um, what you might apply to one region might not be applicable to another region. And it's really important just that you are double, triple checking, like utilize the tools available for you, know how it works, keep pushing your thoughts towards, if you think something is off and you're on a lower level, keep pushing it. Like, it takes sometimes a couple pushbacks to make a correction. So um, that's the long and short. I think that it is an amazing tool to utilize as long as you understand it. Like, how are you going to fight against it if you don't know how it works, and how are you going to utilize it if you don't understand when it's not working for you? So that's my 2 cents.
Man, I think that's wonderful. Brian, any final thoughts? I know we're at time and probably need to get going, but anything to close us out?
I think Shan, yeah, I mean, I think Shan did a really good job of saying, you need to know what you're up against, right? And to kind of piggyback on that point, I think threat intelligence is really important right now. We're in a very, very fast-paced environment in terms of like evolving tools for fraudsters and new technologies, right? So you need some way for your institution, your organization, based on your risk to get a handle of what's out there, whether it's like a dedicated unit, that does this research, or whether it's just like somebody on your team or some members of your team that are, to Cheyenne's point, like actively engaging in sessions like these, and others maybe becoming ACFCS members and staying abreast of it to bring it back to the institution, right? So threat intel is one. And then, depending on, again, the size and type of institution you're with, at some point, if you're not already considering like, AI tools to defend against AI, where you're gonna need those, right? We're gonna get there, because when we talk about things like AI agents doing fake account openings, or the pace of change, right, and the scale and rapidity of these attacks are going to necessitate some level of like automated defense, where it's not about like, hey, you got to look at this picture and see if it's fake. It's just not going to work at scale anymore. So we need controls in place that are, in fact, automated controls to spot generative AI activity, I think, either now or in the very near future.
All right. Guys, I think this was a great conversation. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Deva, thank you for that great shout out. Hey, if you want more of this type of information, of this type of training, of these types of conversations, first thing to do, become an ACFCS member right there at acfcs.org. Real quick, I know we've got some incredible workshops and events coming up. Cheyenne mentioned the Future of FinCrime Skills. That is going to be March 12th and 13th. Is that correct, guys?
Yep.
March 12th and 13th?
That's right.
Brian, you have a suspicious activities report writing workshop. Super excited about that. If you haven't checked out Brian's videos about that over on our LinkedIn account, definitely check those out. That is March 26th.
That's right, March 26th. It's a packed March here coming up, so definitely join us for both those.
Two great events coming up there. Going to be packed with information, useful, actionable takeaways that you can implement in your work as soon as you walk out of those sessions. Also on, and I want to get this right, May 14th, is that correct, for our Web3 and crypto compliance symposium. So if you're interested in cryptocurrencies, Web3, and the compliance landscape and threat landscape around those technologies, you absolutely do not want to miss that. For all of these events, we've got incredible speakers, experts with a ton of experience in the field who have been out there doing the work and know very much what they are talking about. You do not want to miss those sessions. You can find those at acfcs.org under our events tab. Go ahead and register. If you're a member, obviously some of those are going to be free or discounted. And if you're not a member and you want more of this, become a member today, acfcs.org. You can find the links in our comments, should be right up there at the top of our comments section on our LinkedIn account. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This is a great discussion. We love seeing all the names and all the places that y'all are watching from. And we will see you next month for our next FinCrime Friday chat at the last Friday of the month, right here live on LinkedIn. Stay vigilant.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.